Hey guys, welcome. Today we are talking about its motivation, actually I should say Mindset Monday. And today we're talking about what is your driving factor, or sometimes some people may say, what is your why, right? I look at it as what is your driving factor, meaning why is it that you keep doing what you do, or why is it that you want to do what you do? And for all of us, it's going to be something a little bit different. I want to kind of go through what my why is. And this is something that happens to a lot of us. If you go back to your formative years, for most people, by the time they're 14 years old, 13 to 14 years old, their why is set. For some people, it happens because of some life-changing event that they change at a later age. We've seen a lot of people that were associated with in mastery, where till the age of 20, 22, 23, 24, it was something different. We've seen that in a lot of women where they're married, they have a child, and boom, guess what happens? The husband doesn't grow up, but the woman takes the bull by the horn and she grows up, and her why suddenly becomes different because here's a man-child who didn't grow up. Right? And so for all of us, it's going to be different. It's going to be based on our life experiences. So today I want to kind of just take that and talk about what is the driving force for you. And maybe for all of us, it's going to be something different. Right? For me, as far as I can remember, and I don't know why this is, some of you that are watching this may know this. I grew up in India, even though I was born in the United States. Two parents that would be considered high achievers in that particular society. Both my mom and dad were doctors, surgeons. My dad was an orthopedic surgeon. My mom was an OB-GYN gynecologist. And so clearly hard work was not an issue for them, right? They believed in hard work, and that probably of all the people, and I can say this not just because they're my parents, but for all the people that I know, or anybody that I know, the work ethic that they had was next to nobody. I mean, I've never met two people that were harder working individuals and that had a passion for what they did in terms of their careers as a surgeon, especially my father. You would basically say borderline personality disorder, where he was obsessed with what he did. He had a passion for serving people. And it was not based on money, not based on charging the most amount of money. He was based on providing the best and highest level of service, even if he had to put money out of his pocket. I mean, I've seen him literally would go out to dinner at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. He would always stop by the hospital to make rounds of patients he had done surgery on during the day. And this was just a routine. That we were used to it, him coming home 10, 11 o'clock at night after operating 7 to 8 operations a day. Then he would go to, in India, we call it a clinic, basically outpatient facility where you see patients on follow-up visits. And then he would come home literally 11 to 12 at night. This is no exaggeration. Next day would start back at 7:30 a.m. in the morning. And the reason I say that is, what is the driving factor? For all of us, that driving factor is going to be something different. For me, my driving factor was, I always thought lack of. Meaning, and I'm not saying this was the correct thing, I grew up in a wealthier household than most of my neighbors, in fact, than most of my friends. And it wasn't the wealth in the United States perspective. It was wealth more than we were richer than the neighbor next door, certainly, and probably the whole area that we lived in, we were richer. But for some reason, since I was a kid, I had extremely low self-esteem, and I always felt poorer because I always compared myself to somebody who had more, right? So if we had two cars in an era where nobody had a car, I always looked at the person that had 3 and 4 and 6. I don't know where it came from. I don't think my parents certainly didn't put that in my head, but as a child, I was very insecure. So from the very beginning, I knew I wanted to have more than most because it bothered me as to why some people were the haves and some people were the have-nots. And even though we were technically the haves because we got to go to expensive restaurants that most other people couldn't go to, I was very fortunate in that way. But for some reason, I still looked at people who were ahead. Now, having said that, today, finally, I have come to realize there's always going to be somebody who's going to be better looking, that's going to have more, that's going to be prettier, that's going to be more wealthy, that's going to be more disciplined, that's going to be whatever, right? That's called a state of life. So today, I realized that, but for the longest time, I basically always kept seeing the grass is greener on the other side. And I want to kind of go back a little bit and give you a couple of incidences that happened in my life, and just maybe you can relate to this, right? So some of you guys know at the age of about 17 years old, I came back to United States. And I was exposed to a society which, living in India at the time, I was like, oh my God, people in US are rich, right? That's what US is basically the top leading country in terms of business. Hence, we're a very, very wealthy country. And so what I realized was, even in the United States, even though everybody had a car, which is not the case in most of the world, but here, there were some people that were wealthier. And for me, the driving force was that when I came here from India, I had told my parents, hey, I'm going to get to America and I'm going to be rich, right? And this was my obsession. I'm going to be rich. I don't want a penny of your money. I'm going to be rich and I'm going to prove that I'm going to be rich. And literally for about 20, 25 years, since I was 17 till very recently, I have lived my life trying to prove something to, I don't know if I was trying to prove it to my parents. I think I was trying to prove it to myself that I was good enough. So today, as we talk about it, what I'm asking you is that what is the driving force? Do you know what drives you? And finally, I have, for me, right? And so there were a couple incidences that happened early on because especially me coming here to a small town where I was the only Indian kid in school. And so then the normal path would be, hey, you go to get a good education, get a good job, and then you go work for a big company, right? This is what most parents want. My parents wanted no different. They wanted, the biggest thing was a good education. That was the biggest thing. Well, I didn't quite follow through on that during college because I had too many distractions in my head. Rather than going and studying for school, I was busy reading in the library about people who had built businesses, right? People who were rich, motivational books, so all those types of things. And I was the dude in college that when my friends were going out partying at the bar, I was the guy who was paying a cover charge at the time, $5 or $7, to get into the bar, to count the amount of people that were in the bar, to figure out how did this owner of this particular bar be able to afford the bar that they did. And a lot of times what happens is this, right? Through life is kind of funny, right? You've probably heard this saying, which is when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, right? And for me, there were a few different individuals in my life that made an impact. But I remember quitting college because I took the Pell Grant or some sort of a grant I'd gotten, a little bit of scholarship. And instead of buying $1,500, $1,600 worth of books with it, I took that and bought a real estate licensing course at the time. So I get into real estate. I'm 19 years old. I have a thick Indian accent. I still have a slight bit in the background, but at the time it was pretty thick. And I'm in actually Morgantown, West Virginia, and I am, quote unquote, trying to sell real estate, right? I could not, because I literally was making cold calls to people and they had a farm for sale, 8-acre, 10-acre, 12-acre farm. It's a 20,000 people, 25,000 people little town. So, and there are 120 real estate agents in the entire town, right? This is the whole board. For that whole place. So it was kind of interesting to be in that. And I was trying all kinds of different things. I'd go to the football game, WVU football, and I'd give out people my business cards because they said it was a networking meeting. right? I mean, I was so desperate. People would look at me like, hey, I sell houses, I sell houses, I sell houses. And people were like, oh my God, this is so tacky. This is so obnoxious. But for me at 19, 20 years old, I was so desperate, right, for business. Here I am lying to my parents, not telling them that I quit college because that would bring shame to an Indian family. Both parents are doctors, and look at this kid, right? And so, and at that time, my desperation was, what was the driving force? The driving force was one, I did not want anybody else to be right and say to my parents that, you know, you sent your kids to America and look what he did. Quits college, makes nothing of himself. Because I realized that if I failed, that would be considered a failure by my parents. So I say that because at different times in our lives, right, the driving force changes. And what happens is, it was interesting that as I'm kind of going along with this and struggling to be in real estate, I'll never forget this incident that happened to me. I read a realtor magazine, and I hear about this guy. His name is Mike Ferry. So Mike Ferry is pretty old, but Mr. Mike must be in his 70s, I think 78, 79 almost. And he's a real estate trainer, not for real estate investing. He's a real estate trainer for real estate agents, right? And I remember going to his seminar because it said he's one of the most influential people in the Realtor magazine for real estate agents. And I don't know what it was, $200-$300. And I told them that, hey, I will pay for the event when I get there, because the problem was my credit card, I had just made a couple $100 payment, and I wasn't sure if it would go through, right? And I'll never forget this. This is in Pittsburgh, somewhere, one of the Marriotts or somewhere. He was doing this little seminar, and I drove up there in this little Mustang, and I go to the front desk, and they're like, you know, you haven't paid for your ticket. We have a name tag for you, but you haven't paid for the ticket. So you got to pay for the ticket. It was a 2 or 3 day seminar. And I'll never forget, right? They ran my credit card, and of course, it didn't go through, right? Sometimes prayer works, but sometimes it certainly doesn't work for your credit card balance, right? And I tried 2 different credit cards. I believe I had, neither of them went through. And here I am, I mean, feeling, of course, right, extremely embarrassed that literally, right, I, in fact, try to charge less than, you know, $100, because I thought one would go on one and one would go through on the other, and both of them didn't go through. And the lady, I'll never forget this, her name was Kathy. And Miss Kathy, I mean, I'll be gracious to her for the rest of my life, because Miss Kathy let me in. And she's like, you know, because she could see how desperate I was, right? I literally wanted to cry about it. And she let me in. And I said, and I didn't, I mean, I was like, literally, I had almost tears in my eyes, but I'm like, you know, I don't know how, but I will pay you back, right? Literally, to today, talking about it brings tears to my eyes because of how raw it feels. And for $200 or whatever it was a very nominal amount, right? And I'll never forget this, right? She gave me a chair in the front row, and she says, you know, Mike wants you to sit here. I clearly, right, deep down inside knew that Mike did not want me to sit there. She was just being extremely, extremely gracious. And I remember watching Mike in front of, I don't know, what, 1,500 people or so at the time. And I'll never forget this, right? Mike at that time was kind of an interesting person. Either people loved him or they hated him because he told the truth in terms of real estate sales. And I remember him asking an agent, how much did you make last year? And the agent stands up, and literally the agent is petrified, and he goes, Mike, last year GCI, gross commission earned $700,000. Think about it, $700,000. Here I am, can't get $200 on my damn credit card. And I remember him, like Mike's classic way, he spits on stage, or pretends to, and goes, what the hell is wrong with you? You made $700,000. You should be making at least $2 million, right? I mean, I had never met anybody, right, that makes $700,000, let alone like in person, let alone somebody is yelling at somebody for making $700,000. And he said something that I will never forget. He's like, I'm upset with you not because you only made 700,000, but you have potential to make minimum of 2 to 3 million. What the hell is wrong with you, right? And that's my question for you, and that's my question for me. It's not when I ask you what drives you, right? Is we all have a God-given potential. We all have a God-given potential. The question is not whether you're living my potential or am I living yours. The question is, are we living our own potential? And so today what I realize is this. What drives me is that one thing that Mike said at that time, and I'll never forget this, which is that your God-given potential, are you living up to that potential? Because that's really the question. The question is not like what drives me or what drives somebody else. Now, some people sometimes will say, well, it's my family, it's my kids, it's my this, it's my that. So are you telling me that somebody who has kids and doesn't perform at a very high level, they don't love their kids? I don't think so, right? I really don't think so. Somebody who does have kids but performs at a very high level. No, I think what it is a lot of us, including me, we all fail to live up to my potential. And so at least for me, what I've realized is the more clear I am that what my potential is, and the more I try to live up to it. I thought for a time being, and I clearly was, I was trying to chase my dream of proving something to myself and proving something to my parents because I wanted to win their approval, if you say that at least. Yet a time came where I had met and if not exceeded that approval, but yet I realized that I truly believe this, that whenever before you're born, you're standing in line in front of God and God says to you, hey, listen, there are 12 items to pick from. You get 8 to pick from. You only get 8, right? You can pick the wrong 8. It's your, it's your perspective. You can pick the right 8 and that's your choice. And a lot of times, some people just, I believe, because you can't have all 12, right? You can't be everything. You can't be the best looking. You can't be the smartest. You can't be the kindest. You can't have all. Human beings are going to be more of a certain type or less of a certain type. The only difference with human beings is this, that we have a choice to choose, meaning any time in your course of life, you can literally choose to basically say, hey, I'm not going to be a certain way, and I'm going to turn my life's trajectory, and that's up to us. So for you, the question is this: what is the driving force for you, right? The driving force for me today, I realize, is one thing, that I have a potential that's way greater in terms of performance than where I'm performing. I realize that. Right. And whenever I feel depressed, and this is something that it happens to me from time to time, when I do the least, the most depressed I feel. Whenever I don't perform to a level, and this is not because, oh my God, I'm working my butt off and it's not happening, right? It has never happened to me where I have really given it my 100%. And my challenge to you is this today: none of us give it our 100%. Right? Because that is very tough to do, because there's always more possible, right? So when it comes to a driving force, I'm not sure what it is for you, but I know what it is for me, right? And the driving force for me, probably one of the biggest things that built that was, initially my driving force was that I wanted to succeed, and I wanted to succeed at an abnormal level. And then I exposed myself, Mr. Mike being one of them, to people who had achieved an abnormal level of success. And because they had achieved an abnormal level of success, what was normal to them was very abnormal for the average person. And because that's the normal to them, and because they talk as if that's normal, meaning, here's the thing, right? When you start out, you may have a beat up car. At some point in your life, you may go out and buy a really nice car. Once you buy that really nice car, that becomes your norm. Now, to go buy a used really nice car, you're going to be like, hey, why should I buy a used really nice car? I want the really nice car. That becomes your new norm. that becomes the least level at which you're going to perform, because that becomes your new norm. And then you're going to go higher from there, because what's happened is your exposure, what you've become used to, has become so high compared to the 99% of people or 99.9% of people, that suddenly you start performing at a much higher level. So the question becomes is, what is your driving force? Have you ever thought about that question? What is it that drives you, right? Because I think a lot of times people will say, well, it's my kids, it's my wife, it's my this, it's my that. I don't know if that truly is the driving force. If you truly pegged it down, I think it's a much more deep-seated thing that you need to get somewhere. Why? And we have seen this with a lot of people. I see this with people within Mastery, right? I'm not going to point any names out, but there are people within Mastery that if for the rest of their life they did nothing, right? Forget about me. If for the rest of their life they did nothing, they would be okay, right? They're not going to be written up in a magazine anywhere, but certainly they don't have to work because they have enough cash flow. And there's a lot of people within Mastery that have enough cash flow today that if they did not go out and produce more, do more, live a very good quality of life, and have a really great retirement, and they're in their 40s, literally today, right? They're not even that old, so they could live the rest of their life. But something is driving them to the next level, right? What is that driving force for you? This is the question today. See, the driving force for me still today is one thing, that I know I have way greater potential than where I am right now at this moment, right? And so if I didn't have that in my mind, it would be over. It will be over, because there's no point to my life. Not only can I, by growing, meaning by keep pushing the boundaries of where we're at, not only can I make an impact in myself, but I can make an impact with everybody else that is exposed to this information. Just this conversation right now, right? There's a reason that the more somebody grows, right, they cannot grow just by themselves, right? You're not like a plant in the middle of nowhere. What happens is, somebody once said, love and happiness are things you can't get on others without getting a few drops on yourself, right? It's a beautiful statement. Think about it. Love and happiness are not things that you can get on others without getting a few drops on yourself. And I truly believe that in terms of growth, and we're not talking about just financial growth, we're talking about growth of you as a person, growth of you as a human being, right? That driving force. And clearly what that does is that creates an impact. Hopefully, as we continue to share more and more ideas, more and more things that impact what we do. For me, it happens to be real estate, right? To me, it is real estate investing is the singular greatest equalizer that I know that exists for mankind. And I truly believe that for normal people like you and I, we can take this one thing and take it to a level that is unprecedented, where you can leave a legacy not only for your kids, but for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 generations. And this is a tool that we're using to build wealth. But the question is, what about you? Have you thought, what is that one driving force that drives you, that makes you want to do more, that makes you want to be uncomfortable, right? Are you at that level yet where you say, something, if I didn't do, and maybe it's okay, right? If you're not at that level yet, where you're like, because for most of my life, I wasn't at a level yet where I could say, something, even if I didn't necessarily keep doing what I do, I could live the rest of my life, right? Without necessarily having to put quote unquote work. Now, management, of course, because you're going to have to manage any type of a business that you have, but that the business is big enough. So the question again becomes is that, why do you do what you do? What is the driving force for you? For me, I know I have immense potential. And as long as I keep feeling that I have immense potential in my mind, if I don't keep trying to reach it, I just feel restless. I can't go to sleep at night. I lose a lot of sleep. And this is for a lot of people. that this happens. Most people just won't admit it. But someone like me, I have no shame admitting it because I can tell you this with 100% confidence that what the potential is versus where I have reached is not even 5% of what the potential is. Because I don't know the last time. I don't know the last time when I gave it my 80% or 90%. I'm going to say 70%. If anything, I probably operate on a 10 or 15% actual output in terms of what is possible. My challenge to you is, what about you, right? What is that driving force that drives you? Is it an innate ability that you know you have deep inside? Is it the family thing that, hey, I have to do this for my kids? There is something there. There's something. And the day you get to the bottom of it, you will end up achieving way more than you're currently achieving. Now, I don't think this is a place where you get and you're like, oh my God, I'm there. I think this is a ongoing step-by-step process. For me, one of the things for me that happened was I was exposed to somebody like Mike who said, hey, you know something? Where you are is okay. It's just not okay for tomorrow. And it's not just not okay for the day after and the day after and the day after, because what is possible is so far ahead of where you are that where you are just absolutely sucks, right? He probably said it differently. I'm obviously paraphrasing it today, but yet that exposure to what was possible, what I could do with my life. I mean, one day he made a statement. He's like, you know, any car where you have more than 12,000 miles is just not worth driving. And I still remember him driving around in this Rolls Royce, and he's going, I'm thinking, what? At that time, that thing cost a couple $100,000, right? This is 15, 20 years ago, mind you. Today, that same car costs $400,000. And then I realized, it took me about 17 years to realize why he made the statement that he made, because that was such to me, it was just a ridiculous statement, right? Who changes a car at 12,000 miles? But it took me a time to realize, because if you buy an obnoxious car like that, they want you to bring it in at 12,000 miles because they want you to put in a new lease. The reason is the value of the car depreciates. He's like, you know something? Why not just go pick up another one? Most people say, oh my God, I'd buy one car like that for the rest of my life, I'd be happy. And somebody once said to him, it's like, Mike, if you buy a Rolls Royce, don't you realize you could buy 10 other cars? He's like, yeah, for the price of one Rolls Royce, I could buy a parking lot full of Hyundais, right? And he made this smart ass statement. Of course, the person was like, oh my God, Mike was so rude. That's not what he was saying. What he was saying was, hey, listen, you want to buy a Hyundai, go ahead and buy a Hyundai. I just want to buy a Rolls Royce because I want my mind exposed to the best that is out there, because I believe that is possible for me, right? You may think that only a Hyundai is possible for you. I don't think so, but you may believe that, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But the question still goes back to is, what is the driving force for you? This is Andrew Holmes. It's Mindset Monday. And every single week, we talk about things that are on my mind when it relates to mindset on Mindset Mondays. We do these on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. On Wednesdays and Fridays, it's a little bit different tinge to it. That's much more related to real estate. But on Mondays, we're talking about a mindset. So having said that, if you haven't been a part of it, join Burr Cash Flow. Burr Cash Flow investors, invite your friends. And having said that, that's all for today. Talk to you soon.